Hey there, community. In this video, we are going to be talking to Tom McGonagle. He is an enterprise solutions engineer with GitHub, and we're going to be talking about GitNops today. For this conversation, I'm joined by Jason Rahm. And Tom, would love to get a little bit of background on yourself, what you've been up to in the past couple of years, and maybe what's brought you to GitHub.
Oh, it's first of all, thank you both for having me on your program. It's such a pleasure to see you again. It's been way too long. It's been way too long in COVID, and I'm just so happy to be here talking to you today about a passion project of mine called GitNops. And after leaving F5, I actually went to Nginx, which eventually was acquired by F5, and then I went back to CloudBees, and then I was at Spinnaker. If anyone's familiar with that project, the CD company Spinnaker. I was there for a couple of years, and now I just got recruited by GitHub to be as you mentioned, enterprise solutions engineer, and I'm thrilled. I've been a paid customer of GitHub's since 2010, so I don't have to pay them anymore. So I'm thrilled.
Yeah, that's awesome. Comes with the special employee package, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty cool. So you haven't been at GitHub for too long, but you've already started off on a little project inside of GitHub there. So maybe you can kind of introduce that and talk us through it.
Yeah, certainly. So GitNops is GitOps for network automation. And so there's this concept, and it's very familiar to me, that you could use the principles and practices of GitOps. And I think we should talk about exactly what those are. But you can use these principles and practices of GitOps, and you can apply them to X, right? Like, what is X? And I have a couple of funny examples. I have a resume sticker that I created. It's actually on my wall. It's below my marriage, not offer, but my marriage.
Vows.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, this is the vows, so I have this sticker that I created, and you can use GitOps workflow for creating it and uploading it to Canva and then leveraging it. But GitNops, once again, is Git operations for network automation, and I have a workflow that leverages GitHub's technologies to expedite and create these workflows to manage network automation, network devices.
So I guess this kind of fills a need in that other automation workflow tools aren't necessarily geared towards network stuff, right? Like in your time at F5, I remember you were building things, but you were kind of coming up with them with whatever tools you had, and this is kind of really, really focused on the network automation piece.
So the GitOps is entirely on network automation. So whether it's an F5 device or a network device, excuse me, an Nginx device, or if it's a Cisco router or a switch, it's really supposed to be a tool for interacting with the API. And so I'm leveraging the Postman project, Newman, extensively. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm running on-premise using GitHub on-premise runners. I'm running on-premise Newman scripts to actuate and activate the various network devices. And so, I think the very first question is why, right? What's the benefit? What's the collaboration you get with social coding, right? It's the collaboration. And so if you are working with your partners in the network team, you have that collaborative ability to check each other's code, to issue what are called pull requests, to determine, these changes and these config management changes, and use an SCM. That's an old expression for source code management system, on your network devices, on your network code. But it's, and so I'm just going to pause and see if either of you guys have any questions about this kind of conceptually.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe for the audience, we can kind of define a couple of things there, and maybe just starting from the beginning too. So when we're talking about APIs, and hopefully people are at the point where they understand what APIs are, but a couple of the tools that you mentioned, Postman and Newman, maybe we can review those for a second.
Yeah, certainly. Postman is this, extremely well venture capitalized company. They've taken on, I believe, $500 million in VC, and they've created this, one of my favorite tools I'm a tool fool, which is kind of a funny way to put it, but I'm really into tooling. I'm really into products. Like when I worked at F5, I was in product management, and it's one of my favorite tools, frankly, one of my top 3 favorite tools. And what it is it's a it's this workflow manager for APIs and actuating APIs and interacting with them and scripting them and configuring them and just interacting with them. And then they've layered all this the socialization concept on top of it, so you can share these workflows very, very easily, very, very succinctly, very clearly in their ecosystem. And then there's actually integrations with GitHub, and there's it's really quite the infrastructural management tool And really where it exposes itself is, for example, with an F5 big IP, you can hit the API of the big IP to create pools and nodes and VIPs and interact with them and manage them in a sophisticated way. But really, the devil's in the details in that principles and practices of GitOps, right? So GitNops is my thing, but GitOps it's for managing Kubernetes, and so I'm kind of stealing that idea and applying it to network automation.
And then Newman?
And Newman is a Node.js implementation that runs your Postman workflows. And so it's a CLI designed for CI/CD systems like GitHub Actions. And so Newman will take your Postman scripts, your workflows, and then run them on the CLI in that GitHub Actions runner space that would be on premise in your data center.
Awesome. And then maybe we can talk about GitHub Actions for a second too, unless you were defining it later on, but can you kind of compare and contrast, what you mean by GitHub Actions and then having GitHub Actions on premises as well? Like, what's that dynamic?
Yeah, so really the way to think about GitHub Actions is that it's a CI/CD solution, and so I spent a number of years at CloudBees, the Jenkins company, so that's a CI solution, and so primarily a CI solution, and so that's where you build and test your software, and then CD is where you deploy it, essentially to production. And so with the Spinnaker project, for example, Netflix uses Spinnaker to deploy 10,000 times a day, or more, right? It's kind of unknown exactly how much they're deploying, but they're just pushing out these like one-line code changes to production. And I personally never had a problem with Netflix. I'm not sure if either of you guys, literally it always works, right? And so part of that secret sauce is the CD. And so that conceptual idea of CI/CD is being implemented inside the GitHub project, inside the GitHub product. So you have this really great, wonderful, extensible, highly extensible CI/CD solution, and I'm implementing network automation using it.
Okay, very cool. And then you can bring that, what's built inside the GitHub project, you can bring that on-prem?
You can. So there's a couple of different ways to do that, but there is a product from GitHub. It's called GitHub Enterprise Server, and so that would be a solution that would live inside your data center. And then and that has Actions incorporated in it. And then there's actually the ability to use the GitHub Cloud or the GitHub Enterprise Cloud or the GitHub actual core product that there's 83 million developers using. And then what you do is you run the actual containers running Newman inside your data center, inside your management LAN, right? And then GitHub is communicating using secure protocols to those runners, and then actuating your big IP devices, for example.
Oh, awesome. And so, and not to get into like sales stuff or anything, but that itself, is that a product that is purchased as opposed to what people are used to with GitHub? I mean, I know you can pay for GitHub, but people are used to like the free version of GitHub.
That's a great question. So with Actions, it's actually by the minute, and so you're paying by the minute for these runners. And so it's like that early in the convo I discussed that I've been a paid customer of GitHub's for code sharing and my 160 repos and going back to 2010. And so this is actually a different approach to pricing, and so it's actually by the minute.
So you definitely want to have very efficient staged builds and deploys, right?
That's right. Yeah, efficiency.
It's not doing everything in every deploy.
That's right. Yeah, and one of the kind of non-intuitive things about I found that my customers or my friends and family don't necessarily grasp about Actions is how layered it can get, right? Because you're creating these composable chunks, and I can talk you guys through that when I show you the code. You're creating these composable chunks, and so as you said, if you need to build something, it could take hours, right? Jason, like if you need to build code, but my design is actually highly efficient. I'm just leveraging the JSON document that Postman creates, sticking it in a GitHub repo, and then actuating a Newman run with Actions, which would be on your data inside your management LAN of your data center, and then running it. It's incredibly efficient.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. So maybe from here, let's dive into your GitNops project and
sure.
Have a chat about that.
First of all, GitNops is an actual URL that I purchased recently, and you can go to GitNops.com, and then there's kind of this manifesto, and I'm talking about the benefits of GitNops, which are repeatability and automation and agility and so forth. But really, this GitNops page is a pages website that's hosted on GitHub. And so if you go to gitnops.com, that'll bring you to the repo. You just have to click the blue button at the top, and that brings you to this repo. And this repo has the README file. If you guys are familiar with that, I actually have a personal README. If anyone's interested in learning about Tom, there's a lot of discussion about my grandfather, who was very important to me in here. And then there's actually my own personal avatar. And so this is the McGonagle cat, right? So my last name is McGonagle. So this is the McGonagle cat. So the Octocat is the avatar for the logo and the icon for GitHub. And so what we have here is we have a repo, and inside the repo, there's a GitHub Actions Postman environment file. There's a newman test postman collection.javascript, .json document. So these two documents are contained and contain the Postman scripts that I created. And so if you go to my Postman personal page, it's got the same handle, McGonagle, which is actually on my sweater. I was showing you guys that earlier. And this McGonagle so these individual workflows are available there. And if I just quickly switch to Postman, I'll show you what's contained in these JSON documents. There's an HTTP bin document, and I'm just switching to Postman. And here is the Postman collection. And this Postman HTTP bin collection has 80 API calls. And so it's doing things around prompting the user for authorization and returning various variables. And what it's doing is it's hitting httpbin.org, which is an API calling service. And it's supposed to be a stub for a network device, for example, a big IP or an Nginx device. And so I'm hitting the API, and you can orchestrate and you can manage these APIs of these network devices. And in my example, I'm using httpbin.org. And if I come back to GitNops, there's a .github/workflows subdirectory. And this github./workflows subdirectory has a newman script in it. And this is where all the magic happens. And so this is a GitHub action run that's contained inside of a virtual machine. So this virtual machine would be running on your on-premise management LAN. And then there's these two actions. There's actions checkout and then mapball newman action. And this checkout checks out this GitHub repository to the virtual machine, this one right here. And then this newman runs the newman code. And so the way to activate it is by doing a push, right? And so that's just a commit. And so traditionally, the way you actually integrate changes with GitHub and Git is with a pull request. But I've simplified it, so I'm just going to do a commit. So I'm going to go back to the GitNops parent directory, and I'm going to click on this little edit button, and then I'm just going to add like a £sign down here, and that's just going to. And when I click commit, that's going to kick off a actions run. And you can see that here. It's kicking off two, actually. It's building that README, which is the GitHub pages, like website that I showed you at the beginning. And then it's doing this pages build and deploy. I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. It's doing this newman run. And this newman run completed very, very quickly. If we click on it, these are the stages that we just talked about. There's a checkout, and then there's the newman action. If you click on the action, here are the 80 different API calls that newman called as part of that HTTP bin exercise. And so this would be analogous to setting up a node pool, setting up a pool, setting up a VIP, doing these day-to-day tasks inside of a big IP using the API. And what is the benefit of this? You get this incredible amount of collaboration and then project management in JSON. And so here under the GitHub product portfolio is a tremendous amount of project management. It's basically a Jira-like tool that you get for free with GitHub, right? So you get this ability to manage your Git projects your networking management projects like they're a software project. And it's the closest I have ever been able to get to this problem. When Boo, at the beginning you said I was kind of working on this similar stuff when I was at F5, when I was working in sales, and then when I was working in product management, I was actively working on this project. And this is the closest I've ever gotten to that kind of dream state of managing the network as a software project.
Yeah, this is interesting. So it consolidates a number of other tools that you might be using and having to handcraft this and adding the on-prem piece of this, which solves a problem when it comes to doing this for network operations, right? I wouldn't expect a lot of people to be exposing API, like sometimes maybe for their big IPs, been rare scenarios, although we recommend against that, but definitely not for switches and routers, that kind of stuff. You would never have APIs exposed externally, right?
That's right. So I feel the need to really kind of underline. So this design is really to have a runner run inside your management land. So it's like self-contained. It would be going to, like back in the old days of the big IP, there was actually a management port, right? Like back in the real days, it used to be like a serial cable. So it would be, analogous to that today. So you'd be only interfacing on a secure channel, on a secure VLAN, interfacing with the networking devices, and you'd be managing them, you'd be commanding and controlling them. That's my language I'm comfortable with. And you'd be, orchestrating, that's another language, similar, like a synonym to command and control. So you'd be orchestrating these network devices using this framework of calling the APIs, using a locally hosted runner, and then activating them with new man logic that comes from your postman collections and your postman workflows.
Well, on the social side of that too, it's a holistic system, right? It's not just network makes their changes and the software side makes their changes anymore. It's this big collaborative effort because, network can impact the software can impact the network. And so if you have a lot more visibility at the run level on what changes are being made, you can tie those actions all together so that, a software update change can or cannot, depending on your workflows, update things in the network, and vice versa. You can tie a software update to a network change. So it's like, hey, my network change is happening. I'm upgrading to this level of switch. Now that say quality of service is in place, now we can go ahead and push these software updates to take advantage of that.
I think that's an incredibly interesting point. I actually hadn't thought of that, and I appreciate your collaboration with me using this collaborative tool. So you could actually store these GitNops workflows, these JSON environment and collections documents inside the software source code, right? And then this action would actually download the whole repository, but only run the individual actions that you tell it to, right? So if I go back to the workflow, you can see that here where I'm telling it the actual individual workflows. But you could store your network management code inside of your software development code, and there are advantages to that. That was one of the innovations with Jenkins files originally with CI, right? You are storing your CI with your actual source code. That was an innovation, and I see the analog with what you just said, Jason.
Yeah, I'm going back to my like 2005 days where at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, we actually had enterprise standards on we didn't roll software on its own. Everything was tied to a software release. So, what version of software we had on our switches, our firewalls, our routers, all of that, it was all certified together. So nobody updated a switch without, the software teams knowing about it, which back in manual land, that was months and months and months of coordination and working together and going through 15 different lab environments to test and all that. But, something like this where it's automated across the board, software and hardware, a lot of that's removed. And if you've got your testing also built in, man, I'm just thinking about all the person hours we went through way back in the day that automations like these, orchestrations like these solve.
Yeah, like a cutover, like something as simple as like taking a port offline somewhere and bringing a port online somewhere else, and maybe that involves an IP address change and a DNS change, and all along the way something could fail. So there's a human saying, okay, that port is down and off, so I will now bring on this, and that has changed, and I'm going to change the IP address, and if that actually went through, then I'm going to change the DNS. And yeah, a while ago that would have all been manual clicky clicks.
Yeah, I think you both kind of give me an idea that I hadn't considered when I originally wrote up this README. And, the benefits I suggested were disaster recovery, and I guess I did kind of capture it with scalability. But you could script the actions, and have n number of runners, so that if you had a large network, you could basically hit all the APIs at the same time, right? and then it would just be a change window of like 5 seconds,
Right.
and then everything would just activate. And there's a word for this, and maybe you guys can help me kind of pull it out. But it's not scalability comes to mind first, but there's actually a word for this type of behavior. And I'm drawing a blank. I'm struggling to remember the word, but we could probably take it offline, or I could come back to it. But parallelization, that's the word. You can parallelize the configuration of a large substantial network. That was the idea I was trying to think of.
And often, like, thinking about it from a business perspective, you're doing these things, you're upgrading software, you're bringing new features into the network because you're trying to enable more stuff for the business. So at the end of the day, the business does benefit from this because you can get to features faster and you can deploy that next application faster because now you've enabled transit across the network or something like that, or you've enabled that new server that has the new code or the new platform on there, so you can deploy the new services on there. And so all of these things that people just think of the network as the network, we just needed to communicate. Well, the network is important because the network enables the applications to talk to each other, and that's going to enable the business. So we're getting there. We're building this foundation that's going to help out.
I think you touched on something very critically important to me, and it's this concept of speed, right? I would argue that these scalable, parallelizable, configurable, composable, and then coordinatable approach is faster, right? Like at the end of the day, there is a possibility to increase your speed by some number, right? Is it 10%? Is it 1,000%? We don't know yet. Like, this is a relatively new approach. It's a relatively new idea. But I think with really, really good systems thinking, I think there's an opportunity to do some really neat things with this idea.
And that safety net too, right? Like, because you have checks happening along the way, and hopefully by splitting up the actions, you're reducing blast radius, and then that impact of one small mistake somewhere, not picking on any particular huge companies because they've all had it at this point, but it always comes down to, small little things that have cascading problems. The more that you can reduce that blast radius through things like this and things like checking and using something like GitHub Actions to enable all of that stuff just on the network side, and, saving your company from potential hazards sounds awesome as well.
That brings up another great point. In CI/CD, there is a concept of failing fast and failing forward, right? When I was at F5, I did discuss it with a lot of people that the network is different than an application developer. Network engineers, if they mess up, get fired, and application developers do not, right? Like, I'm willing to say that and hang my hat on that. But failing fast is an interesting approach. If you have a 1 second change window and it takes 1 second to revert back, the CEOs are much more comfortable with that than, an 8-hour window on a Saturday night, at the end of the month, or whatever it takes, right? Like, and so if you're optimizing for speed, there are tremendous advantages.
Well, I think both on the software and the network side, there was a day where it was okay to design to the bleeding edge, and a little bit of fragility was okay, but I think automation, especially supportable testing around automation, has brought a little bit more sanity back to the industry, I think, and that, hey, some things are just a little bit too niche and edge for us to automate successfully. So let's maybe, re-architect. Let's rethink the feature requirements a little bit to get to the stable version of whatever we're trying to go for. And I'm thinking through some of the F5 stuff. It's like there's iRules that are very easy to automate and put into an AS3 type package, and then there's other things that make automation hard. And so as automation becomes more important, they're like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to have to solve that problem a different way. I think that's good, and I think that the automation in general is helping to solve some of that.
I love that.
Awesome. Did you have any more that you wanted to talk through on GitNops, Tom, or is that kind of wrap it up for us?
I think it's wrapped up. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So, Tom, you mentioned it at the beginning, but first of all, where can people get a hold of you? And then second of all, where can people check out GitNops and potentially contribute to GitNops?
So my handle at GitHub, so you're like, for anyone who doesn't know, like GitHub is like Facebook for developers. There's 83 million software developers that are all using it. So I have an account. My handle is my last name. Like I mentioned earlier, it's on my sweater. and it's McGonagle. And so if you just look me up here, you can find my GitHub email. Everyone and anyone is welcome to send me an email and connect with me. I have my link tree, which is kind of this Instagram-y like link sharing site. It's actually kind of neat, and so I'm kind of into it. And there's a bunch of stuff in there. You can find my Calendly if you guys wanted to talk about GitNops, and then my Twitter. And I'm not a heavy Twitter user, but it's up there as well. But really, the place to find me is github.com/McGonagle.
Yeah, sounds good. And, are you taking pull requests for the project at this point, or are you still kind of...
Absolutely, yeah. It's a public project. That's a great question.
Well, thanks a lot, Tom, for joining us today. We will leave all of those links in the show notes as well, and we'll also, point everybody over to your profile. So thanks very much for joining us today, Tom.
Thank you, and great catching up. It's been a while.
Thanks.